Hi, and welcome to wherever this channel is. And today I want to talk about my treatment for my leukemia that I went through. Because I'm sure I've talked about this before, maybe smatterings here and there. I talk about this all the time in person, so I don't know what I've actually shared on here. Back in was January 2022 is when I got diagnosed, and I was with a hospital, which I'm not going to mention the name of. They were reluctant to test me, but I'm like, test me, because I had been going through 6 months of medical issues before then that had been unresolved. And they said, well, we can just wait and see. No, don't do the test. And the oncologist actually said there's good news and bad news. And the good news is it's not CML, but the bad news is it's CMML. And I've looked at it, and CML is actually less worse than CMML. CML is treatable without having to do a bone marrow transplant. I mean, you can do the bone marrow transplant, but it's treatable without it. Where CMML, which I have or had, is terminal without a bone marrow transplant. No ifs, ands, or buts. Year and a half left, that's it. So I'm not quite certain how not having the more common treatable cancer is good news. Anyway, they could not treat me. They said, sorry, you need a bone marrow transplant. We can't do it. But luckily I happen to be in Seattle, where Seattle Cancer Care Alliance is, and they specialize in leukemias. So they were able to treat me. So I went to them, got referral, and they also then did the bone marrow aspiration test, which I think take a big needle, stick in your hip, suck out a good chunk of your bone and marrow. It is a painful process. I've had 5 of those this past year and a half. They do that, and they verified, yeah, you have CMML, which is a genetic disorder. It's not a hereditary genetic disorder, it's just somehow my genes got mutated, and the only solution is to kill all my bone marrow and replace it with new ones. So in February, actually, I started a regimen called decitabine, which was a chemo, and it was mostly just to calm down because my white blood cells, the overall result is my white blood cells go crazy. They're not doing anything, they're all juvenile, but they're just flooding my system, which then makes me sick because I've got all these immune cells that aren't actually immunizing me. They're not actually fighting off anything. They're just partying. So the decitabine was supposed to help to mellow it out. I did 2 rounds of that, and then for the actual treatment itself, I did something called, I think it was fluridabine? Yeah, something called fluridabine, but I also did 2 total body irradiations, and the first one I didn't really consider was a total body irradiation, even though it was actually very much so. I had a little hardware on my chest called a PICC line. No, called a Hickman line. I also did a PICC line, but that's a whole other story. That was for the previous medical stuff. The PICC line's in your arm, the Hickman line's on your chest, and it goes straight to your heart, and it's just this little dangly thing, which I don't have now, so I can't show you the pictures of it. But the whole idea is you can use it easily for blood draws, you can use it for injecting things into you really easily. You keep it around for a good couple of months. I had it in for over 100 days. I think you can have up to like 6 months you can have one of these things. But the TBI was radioactive antibodies were injected into my body. But let's actually back up a step. The original plan was just all chemo. It was all going to be flood my body with chemicals and kill the bone marrow that way, which would have been, I'd have been like a month or 2 in the hospital with a feeding tube, being miserable, trying to survive, and then I would get the bone marrow transplant actually at the beginning of the process after I get flooded with these chemicals. And I would have lost all my hair and had all these other symptoms. The doctor at the time, back in, it was April, when she's saying you could do all these clinical trials, was very, very, very enthused, is the best way to describe it, about any clinical trials. And she gives this whole booklet, this thick booklet, saying you could sign up for any of these clinical trials you want. So I'm looking at them and go, sure, I'll just sign up some. I don't care. As long as I don't have to do any extra homework, they can take blood draws and whatever. And after I sent up like 4 or 5 of them, she's like, no, stop. You don't need to sign up for everything. Because she really was not excited about clinical trials. But then a couple weeks later, she mentioned, hey, there's this experimental treatment that is this radiation treatment that will kill your bone marrow. You won't lose your hair. You'll only be in the hospital for like a week, which I was only in the hospital for like 8 days. The only downside is I'm going to be radioactive. Okay, I mean, yay. That's interesting, which I'll get to that. But she was excited about this. And again, I'd never seen her excited about anything. And it was quote experimental in the sense that she said it had been used successfully for more advanced cancers, something called AML, which means you've got like a month or two to live. And now they were just testing it with lesser cancers, the kind that kills you in a year and a half, terminal type of thing. Testing with those types of cancers just to see what dosage is the proper dosage. And I was near the end of the trial, so they'd already fine-tuned most of it. They're just doing a little bit more fine-tuning. And I'm like, if she's excited about this, when she is excited about nothing else, I'm doing it. And it was a good decision. So they did inject me. The guy came out with this huge box, and he's in a suit, into the hospital. Huge box, lead-lined box, and they open it up, and it has this radioactive stuff that they inject into me. And afterwards, they take a Geiger counter to make sure that I'm the right level of radioactive. And they even gave me a little card saying, you're going to be radioactive for 3 days. Don't touch anything that's going to be used by anyone else. If you go to any federal buildings, show them this card because you're not a terrorist. And they'll say you're radioactive on purpose, which was very interesting. I was also liquid iodine. I had to drink a lot of that during that time. Oh, that is the worst tasting thing ever, but it's supposed to protect your thyroids. Anyway, that's what happened. So I had that. That was considered total body abrasion, and it did kill all my bone marrow. And then a couple of days, I think 10 days after that is when I got injected by the stem cells from my brother, which then got flooded into my system. And you could tell they was in the hospital, not at that point. Later, they tested my blood levels like every day. And you can see my neutrophils and my white blood count like drop all the way down to 0, which was interesting, considering it had been sitting super high for so long. And they also did, I think right before the stem cells is when they did the second total body irradiation. So they did the injectable one, and then 10 days later they did another one, in which I got put in a room where there's this giant, like James Bond laser, this huge, huge thing. The door to the room was like 3 feet thick. It was just this huge, it was an ordeal. And people do have this kind of radiation. For me, it was a total body, which they just shoot this laser at all your body. They especially mark off parts of your body that are going to get less radiation by putting like little plates on the laser. And they actually used packing tape to attach me to the table so I wouldn't move while I'm being shot by the radiation. Other people, because they get several treatments of radiation this way, would have specially built foam pillows, which I didn't have that luxury because I was getting a one and done there. So I had the 2 total body radiations. And then after that, I'm sure there's various medicines I've taken which are considered chemos, like Jakafi was considered chemo, and some other stuff was considered chemo. I didn't keep track of which ones were which. Of the actual injectables, that was it for injectables, and so overall the injectable stuff wasn't so bad, and the radiation, the beginning experience was horrific. Like if I got like a little paper cut, like I noticed my whole hand like turned all black just from a little paper cut. I got bruises changing bed sheets. That's how weak I was. But again, I only spent 8 days in the hospital, no feeding tube, anything like that. And so that was really, really well. And like I kept my hair, my hair is a lot thinner than it used to be, even though it's been thin to begin with, but I didn't lose it. I had nausea. I had so much nausea. They gave me 3 different medicines to deal with the nausea, depending on whether I was eating food, whether I was not eating food, whether I was sleeping. There was that. And they gave me this fun little pill thing, which was filled up with like 6 to 12 pills for every single slot, depending on what I need to take when. Now I'm only using 3 of them a day, and they're still filled up with 6 to 12 pills each one. So I'm still taking a bunch of medicines. And this is over a year and a half later. It was a good treatment. They did give you an 80% chance that you'd survive the treatment. So this is not something that is done lightly, because it will kill you. 20% chance it kills you. That's a bit harsh. And those are the good numbers because of my age and my health. You don't get numbers better than that. Anyway, that was my treatment, and it went well. I still have little effects, not from the treatment, but just everything. But that's what it was. And I'm still here, over a year and a half later. So I'm glad I went through it. And yeah. Anyway, have a good one.